When it comes to Valentine's, I really enjoy adding a lot of details and different elements to my cards. So in this video lesson, we are going to do everything from scanning our own heart into the scan and cut to foiling to using some paste. This is going to be a lot of fun and a lot of great pieces to create our own little collaged card. So to get started, we need to make our heart pattern. And what I've done here is to draw a heart onto white cardstock. You could use clip art, you could use anything printed out as long as it's got a solid closed line. And I'm going to place this onto my scan and cut mat. Here on the machine, I'm going to go into scan and I'm going to go into scan to cut data because what we want to do is scan this in and create our own cut file. And start. Once this is scanned in, we are going to drag our little arrows up so that we are creating a file that is more appropriately sized to our image. Just making sure the entire image is in there. Once satisfied, you just click OK. And once it is finished recognizing it, you can tell it if you would like it to cut inside and outside, or in our case, because it is a simple line, we just want the outline. And once you have reviewed your image and everything is fine, you just tell it to save. You've got a couple of saving options. We're just going to save it right here to the machine. And that's it. Now we're ready to cut. So to cut, I'm going to go ahead and eject my mat here so that we can get the paper that we would like onto the mat. And I am going to use this pink paisley floral paper. This paper is just so pretty, and we can place it anywhere on the mat and just use your hand, just make sure everything is firmly attached so it'll stick nicely for us, and place the mat back on the machine and load it. And we're going to go ahead and check our blade just to make sure. I had it all the way at 0. That's not going to work very well. Usually somewhere between 3 and 4 for a newer blade will work well for pattern paper that's about this weight. You can do test cuts and figure out what works just right for you. So what we're going to need to do is go to the home screen and go into pattern. When we go into pattern, we're going to go into save data, and we're looking for the data from the machine. And there is our heart that we just created. It's right there waiting for us. We just say OK. And now what we're going to do, this is one of my favorite features, this little button with the little blue square with the line running through it. If we click this button and say start, it's going to scan the mat so that it knows where the paper is. So that now what we can do is actually place the heart exactly where we want it. If we wanted to do any resizing or anything like that, we could do that as well, but this is the exact size heart that I want, so I'm not going to do that. And we can see where the paper is, and I'm just going to move it over onto the paper where I would like it, say OK, and cut. And that is all we have to do. Once this is cut out and we have lifted it off of the mat, we are ready to get out our paste and play. As you can see on my card, there's a lot of different elements, but each one by itself gets assembled separately and handled separately. So we're going to start with our little heart that we cut out, and I'm going to place a stencil over it, and I'm going to use texture paste, or molding or modeling paste would also work. I don't need a lot. I'm just going to put a thin layer over the heart, over the words, and this is going to add texture to an already really pretty pattern paper, but it's also going to be something that we can color once it's dry. Now we are going to want to wipe off any excess paste both on the mat and also on the stencil, because we are going to repeat using this stencil now onto some watercolor cardstock. So this time we're going to place the stencil down, and I'm going to use some picked raspberry distress ink, and I'm not going to try to do the entire surface. I'm just going to do parts because I want this to show up only parts and bits and pieces of it. I don't want it to look like there's a block of stencil down. So I'll continue doing this until I'm happy with how it looks. And once I am, I will add a little bit of ink. Not everywhere, just a few spots here. Just add a little bit of ink at the edges. and set this aside for the other stencil. Our other stencil is a heart stencil, and we're gonna go back to using paste for this one. And again, we don't need a lot, a little bit of paste, and this time I'm gonna be very careful to scrape as much as I can so that there is little, maybe even no paste left on the stencil, because what I'm going to do is continue using it. If you need to, you can wipe it down, but if you have really scraped your stencil well and there's not any paste, there's no reason to do that. You can just continue on. And a third time, just for a little bit more. You could do this as much or as little as you like. It's really a lot of fun to just add a little bit of random texture there. Now, once you are happy with how it's looking, we're going to set this aside and let it dry before we continue. And of course, clean up any paste that you've got so that it doesn't dry and stick to your mat. Next up though, what we're gonna do is play with one of my new favorites, an adhesive rub-on. This is the sheet of adhesive rub-ons, and they look yellow. That's actually just adhesive. So whether you have gold foil or if you have foil sheets and basically anything that you could stick onto this, it's probably gonna work, and it's so much fun. I really can't get enough of it. So to do this, I strongly recommend getting out a pair of scissors and cutting out the rub-on you want. Now, normally rub-ons are, of course, sticky. These rub-ons are extra sticky because they are, in fact, adhesive rub-ons. So what I have found is you do not want to have any rub-ons on this sheet you do not want on your project. Do not include them in this step. I'm just going to peel off the backing and set it onto my pattern paper. You can set it anywhere you like. And what I'm really impressed with is that it does come with this tool, but it really doesn't require much tool work. It really doesn't require very much pressure to get the entire rub-on to really release. You don't have to sit there and scrub and scrub. It's going to do a really good job all on its own of sticking to your surface. So just like so, and now my favorite part, I have some of the Prima foil. This is the berry. It's so pretty. I love these foils. And I almost just as much love what the foil leaves behind when you're using it. You can already see here, there's one that I already did. So what you want to be very careful about here is once I set this down, it is done. You're not going to get a second chance. So I like to make sure that the entire surface is going to be covered before I set it down. You could trim your foil down if you wanted. I haven't really found that I necessarily need to do that. And then just give it a gentle rub. If you have a brayer or bone folder, something like that, that might work as well. You can also just use your finger, and it's going to want to stick. Okay, it's going to definitely, that adhesive rub-on wants to stick to our foil. So it's not going to take much. I just like to make extra sure that everything is down. If for some reason you come up and go, oh no, there's a spot that didn't work, you can just come back in with a different fresh piece of foil and tap again if for some reason you've got a little spot where the foil didn't quite take. And to me, that's really great, because if you do make a mistake or pull it off before it's really adhered, you do have a chance to make that up. Now, from here, I'm going to just cut this out roughly. It'll only take me a second here. And once this is cut out, I'm ready to start assembling our card. So here I have the heart and the background. These have already dried, and that's really important before you continue on. And I have some worn lipstick distress ink here. I'm going to put a little bit on a foam blending tool, and I'm going to add a little bit just where the hearts are, so just where the raised surfaces on the background. And that's going to add just a different color and a little extra interest here to my background. And then, because I can never just stick to a couple colors here, we're going to go in with Plastic Flamingo Lawn Fawn ink. And again with foam blending tool, and I'm going to do the same on the heart. My heart that has the paste, I just really love how adding just a little bit of ink adds a little bit of detail and just another level of color. And I'm also going to come back in on the background here and add a little bit more at the edges. I love using up Valentine's Day and all my love of all things pink. So much fun stuff that we can do. All right, now we've got our hearts and we've got our base. It's time to add a few finishing touches. If you wanted to add some sprinkles of mist or something like that, that could be a lot of fun. I'm gonna add one more layer of paper. I'm gonna get some pattern paper here for a little strip just to kind of bring it all together here. And to do this, I'm just going to tear the paper. You could use your paper trimmer or a ruler if you wanted to make sure it stayed really straight. I'm not too terribly worried about it since I'm working with a thin strip to begin with. It's pretty easy. So we're gonna use that to kind of tuck that in. And I'm not gonna worry about if my hearts go over the edge for two reasons. First of all, I can always make it a little bit larger if I need to with a mat. You can see how this one here, the finished card, I've got a mat and then it's also mounted onto a finished card. So whenever I'm working on something like this where I'm doing a collage, if I get where, oh, I wish I had a little more room, that's one of the big reasons I work on a card front, not a finished card. I can always add a little more room if I need to. So these are looking good. Now we want some embellishments. If you have a small sentiment stamp, that would work really nicely, maybe on a little banner or a little piece of cardstock. I have got some sentiment stickers here that are gonna be a lot of fun. I also have all of these pretty pink princess buttons and pearls and sequins that I'm gonna pull from. And I have some of the new mirrored hearts from Tim Holtz as well. So I think the mirrored hearts are just screaming to be used on this Valentine here. So we're gonna get some of those out. And we'll get a small one and a bigger one. I love that there's all different sizes in here because sometimes you really do need a small embellishment and sometimes you want a little bit bigger one. All right, so all of this together, it's time to get some adhesive and start really assembling. I'm gonna start with this strip. First, I'm gonna decide which way I want this, what part of it I like, and glue down my strip of pattern paper. And then I'll go with this heart next. And then of course my foiled heart. And I'm not putting a ton of adhesive on these because I want to be able to move them around a little bit. And once I've decided that I really like them in their spots, I will lift them up and add a little more underneath to really hold them down. And we've got our sentiment, of course. We're gonna go with Happy Valentine's Day. And I'm gonna line this up so that it goes out to the edge. And that's going to help me create a spot for my embellishing. So my embellishing, I'm gonna do a little cluster. I've got some glossy accents here that I'm applying to this end. And of course, now the fun part, we get to pick our sparkly buttons. I'm gonna pick one with a little glitter because I always do. Any excuse to have a little bit of glitter in my book is a good one. And then we can add in some sequins. If I wanted to add in some beads, I could add in some beads. Really, whatever it is that you've got that you're thinking, oh, well, this would be really cute here, or this is the right size. On a little collage like this, the embellishments that are the right size are probably more important than precisely what they are. Treat them all kind of the same, you know, just go based off of what it is that you need for the space you're working in. All right, once this is done, I can trim off any excess. Now, on the heart, if I wanted to, I could leave it whole and let it hang over the edge, or if I would rather, I can do what I'm doing right here and trim this off. And then I'm going to pick out a paper that is a little bit contrasting here, so there's a little bit of difference, but it's still not quite contrasting enough. So I'm gonna pull out some gray ink. I have the Lawn Fawn Manatee ink, which is a nice soft gray. And I'm just going to run it along the edge here. You can see I just have at a nice angle here. Just if I want it a little more, I can tilt my ink pad up a little more if I want a little more, leave it straight if I only want the very edge. And I like to take my time on this and take a look and then decide we can always use more ink. But once we have put a lot of ink on the front of that card, there's nothing we can do to take it back off. So take your time with that and see what works for you. And then we can adhere to another piece of paper here. And I'm not going to put very much on there because again, I want to make sure I like where it's at and everything before I commit to more adhesive. And once I do, I can just lift it up and add a little more as needed. And there we have it, a collaged Valentine all ready for giving to someone you love.